Hour one, Shea Dixon, who covers it for Geaux247 and really unrivaled when it comes to the coverage, joins us now here on OTB to talk a little bit more about recruiting. Happy belated 4th to you, Shea. Thank you for the time.
Absolutely. Hey, look, Jordy, I guess I know recruiting is happening at a premium when you're rocking this kind of lineup from Maason Smith all the way to me.
Yep.
So I don't know how I got lumped into that, but I feel good about it.
Well, it's easy.
You're the legend,
Shea.
Shea. Yeah.
Maason Smith was asking how he ended up in the lineup when he saw your name on it, bro.
Yeah.
Can you update that recruitment real quick? Because he dropped it down to 8 over the weekend from 10. LSU is there. Where in your mind do you specifically think they sit?
I remember back in the day when T-Bob was trimming it down from 40 offers to 35.
Exactly.
Big deal. Look, and Maason was great. I mean, if people listening haven't gone back and listened to that, I'll give you some free advertisement here, guys. Listen to that interview, whether it's on those YouTube page or Twitter or on the website. It was really good. I mean, for a kid who's about to be a senior in high school, who's a 5-star, he's got his head on straight. And look, I've seen him 10 plus times. We're talking about a dude who's 6'5", 315, can run for how big he is, certainly agile. He's not just a guy who will bowl you over with his size. He actually does have some nice, not just punch to him, but some moves and some agility. And this is the kind of guy that Ed Orgeron salivates over. Yeah. I mean, how important is it to the D-line coach to land defensive linemen or front 7 guys and edge rushers? And they've done a great job with that in this class. But there's no doubt that Maason Smith's up there at 1. I'd safely whittle that 8 list down to a few more teams. I think you'd say LSU. I think that you would say that Georgia's in that mix. I think that Southern Cal is at least a school he's talked up as wanting to visit. And obviously Corey Foreman, another 5-star, is from California, and USC's in the mix with him as well as LSU. And package deals don't really happen a lot, but they've talked about the possibility of teaming up together in college. And certainly Alabama's in the mix. I think Florida. But I think Georgia's caught his attention. I think Southern Cal's caught his attention. And then, look, other teams have kind of been flirting in there, OU and Miami, Florida, schools like that. But it's, in my mind, it's going to be tough for anybody to beat LSU. For a kid who's from Terrebonne, has been recruited for as long as he's been recruited by, whether it's Ed Orgeron or Bill Johnson, or Greg McMahon, who recruits the home area for LSU. Everybody has been on Maason Smith, and he's hung out with O on the sidelines at game days, despite the fact that he was as a junior and sophomore at the time. It's just one of those things where they've made him a priority, guys, for so long that it's tough for me to see them not finishing with him, especially when the program's coming off a national championship and recruiting as well as they are, where we're moving on 2 cycles right now where they haven't missed on the Louisiana guy that they wanted.
Yeah. A top priority that popped over the weekend was one of these big wide receivers in the state, Chris Hilton. Can you update his game for our listeners and just what he brings to the class, and then what that does to the focus of Brian Thomas?
Yeah, Jordy, you'll remember a couple of years ago, I guess it was freshman and sophomore years, he played basketball for Zachary, and he can jump out the gym. I mean, we're talking about a kid who, as a freshman in high school, hit 7 foot on a high jump, won state, has a national record in the high jump. So off top, incredible athlete who will do both in college. I mean, you looked at his Final Four. He had Alabama in there. They're not a great track program, but A&M, Georgia, LSU, he was serious about looking at schools that would give him the chance to play in the SEC on Saturdays and then compete in track and field at a pretty high level, and those 3 schools are pretty good at it. LSU gets a huge one here, and look, I can tell you, he can jump out the gym and dunk a basketball. He can clear 7 feet in the high jump, but he also happens to be the number 5 receiver in the country on 24/7 Sports, and we've seen him at West Monroe when they beat them in the state title. It was 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
And that was kind of his big splash on the scene. He made so many plays that game, but made the game winner at the end. And a 6 foot, 175 pound, by the time he gets to college, he'll be, 6'1", 6'2", 195 pound, 200 receiver who has a little bit slighter build than guys like Jamar Chase would, but also is probably a little bit more of a plus athlete than them in terms of what he can do, not just as 40, he probably runs in the 4.4s, but I mean, this is a kid who can crack 11 seconds in the 100. Phenomenal athlete. I think that he's one that when you look at what they did last year with Butte and Coy Moore and getting Alex Adams and obviously Gilbert, then you've got all these kids on roster right now from Chase down to Trey Palmer and those guys, and you're bringing in now what is arguably already the best receiver class in the country. I mean, they have 3 of their commitments, toss in JoJo Earl out of Texas, who is an electric slot player, like a Jalen Waddle type, but a bit bigger. And then you've got Deion Smith out of Mississippi. All 3 of those kids rank as top 10 receivers nationally.
Wow.
And they've still got Brian Thomas out there. So if this class finished right now, just those 3 guys, it would be one of the best in the country. And you look around, if you had just those 3 guys in your room, you'd be like, oh, that's really impressive, let alone that they're all in the same class. Then add on top of it that the number 2 receiver in the country is playing his high school ball right down the road in Walker and is very much a candidate to land in this class. And I'd have to go back, but even in the Jarvis and Odell years, I don't think they signed a class that had 4 receivers that were all this highly touted coming out. I mean, if they land these 4, they'll have 4 of the top 10 receivers in the country. That's not something LSU's done in recent memory. And look, they've never hurt for receivers, but I'd have to think that what they did on the field last year has helped out a little bit here.
Where's your crystal ball on Thomas?
It's on LSU.
Uh-huh.
I honestly, and we have this new thing where you can also get kind of a feel for how confident we are with a confidence rating. And it's 0 to 10, and not that you would put in a pick if you felt less than 5. I think mine's at 6 or 7 right now, but I thought that he might shut things down. Golly, a couple weeks back, there was some buzz that he might have gone ahead and gotten things out of the way, but I think that he and his pops and family have talked it over to where they do want to make a couple of visits, but that's just, it's not like you used to say, like, oh, this kid's not going to commit in the summer because in August and September he's going to make a bunch of visits and then he's going to commit. We can look at another guy who I'm sure we'll talk about in a second, Keanu Coate. He was going to pop for LSU 2 months ago in May, and his dad said, look, you've already seen Auburn, you've seen Bama, you've seen Florida, you haven't seen LSU. And he said, well, we like them the most from how much we talk to them. We have the Zoom calls. We feel like we know them really well. And his dad said, all right, it's May 6th at the time. And he said, give it a month or 2. Let's go over there and see it. When we get there, if you still like it, commit. And now we're 2 months in and they still can't take visits until at the earliest September. And then what happens if you can't take visits in the fall, at least not like you'd normally be able to. So tying that back to Brian Thomas, we're talking about a kid who he said he's wanted to take visits. He said he's wanted to wait it out, but I could see him doing it at any time. And Thomas is interesting because there's this other layer to it where he's cut from the old school cloth. Like he doesn't do much on Twitter. Mm-hmm. He could care less if someone knew he had an LSU Bama offer or not. He just goes to school, plays basketball, plays football, and that's about the extent of it. And you don't really hear from him other than that. So he's a type that right now I need to check my text. I mean, he could have just committed or he could commit on signing day. I don't think he's in any real rush because it's his decision. And I think LSU holds a little bit of a lead. I'd credit that to them really turning up the heat with Kevin Falk now recruiting the Baton Rouge area. Previously, it had been Tommy Robinson. Now that we are turned the page to this 2021 class, you've got guys like Orgeron on him way more and Mickey Joseph on him way more. Carter Sheridan has played a role there as someone, used to work with the Saints and obviously knows high school football in Louisiana very well. He's got some connections there. So I think that started to help them out. But, boy, I can sit here and make a case, the case for why Alabama might get him and the case for why LSU might get him, but I'd be shocked if he doesn't go to one of those 2 schools.
Talking to Shea Dixon of Geaux247. Follow him on Twitter. You get everything that your recruiting heart desires. Shea, you mentioned that wide receiver room, and it's something that we talked about in hour 1, right? It seems like there's now more of an emphasis just in roster building theory that you can have a ton of success through the wide receiver room. That's kind of new. What's not new is building in the trenches. And when you look at LSU and when you look at the athletes that Louisiana produces offensive line is the position that you kind of most consistently have to work for. You got the big commitment from Dellinger out of Michigan. I've had multiple people, they want me to ask you this morning, where does LSU sit with the 5-star offensive tackle Tristan Lee?
I mean, I think I don't have a crystal ball pick in, but if I did, I'd pick LSU right now. And he's got his who's who of college options. And this is a kid that plays in Virginia. He's got Virginia Tech on him. I don't think he goes there. Clemson's a big player, and they've been recruiting him heavily. Bama, Penn State, Oklahoma, Ohio State, all these schools have been after him hard, but I don't think anybody's really made him that consistent priority like LSU has. And from talking to Tristan, he's shared that the LSU side, it feels like a family vibe. He talks to Craig each day. He talks to other people on staff, and he says it's a little bit more personal of a recruitment. And I think that says something because that's a kid from Virginia. He's not from Louisiana where look, we understand that as a sales pitch that LSU uses often, that they kind of create this family atmosphere. And that's what Les did all the way through to Orgeron. Both of them have been the same in that regard in terms of how much the staff's involved in recruiting a kid and not just a position coach and not just, look, the coaches, guys like Colin D'Angelo, who you heard from before I came on earlier in the morning, they go from top to bottom. Sharon Lewis, all these different people who work in football play a hand in recruiting these kids. And I think Tristan's seen that. And my guess would be right now that LSU's the team to beat. I think that they've done a really good job of selling the reality, T-Bob, that, look, we're not recruiting offensive tackles. And this is what a guy like Craig might say. Louisiana's not spitting them out every cycle. They've got one next year in Will Campbell, who's elite. But it's few and far between Lael Collins, Cody Ford, and then who. You don't have a lot of high NFL draft picks coming out as tackles. And because of that, you don't have to fear that, hey, look, we're turning around and getting 3 more next year. And then he would point and say, look, this team won a national championship, a Joe Moore Award, all this. And how many of the linemen, like 4 of the 5 starters are gone. The swingman got drafted and left as a senior in Traore. So not only do they need linemen, they also haven't been stacking up these 5-star OTs like Tristan Lee often, not even like Garrett Dellinger, a top 100 guy that often. So I think that their focus, guys, is on Tristan Lee, and they'd cast a wide net early on all these 5-star offensive tackles. He's the one that sticks. And I think that what James Craig thinks is, if I can pull this off, then I've got bookends. I've got Tristan Lee and Dellinger who can play left and right tackle for me, however it pans out, and give me a couple of years to 3 years, 2 to 3 years starting at the position, which is just something LSU hadn't had a ton of beyond guys like Ethan Posick, at least in recent years. And I guess when I'm talking about tackles, he even kicked inside, but this one would be massive. And I guess a lot like an Austin Deckler, someone who would play that often for you.
Great information as always, Shea. Thank you for the time.
All right, guys. I'll see y'all later.
All right, man.
Later, Shea.
Shea Dixon checking in from 247 Sports.